Welcome to Mystics and Muons. It's been a little while since I've posted anything, created any content, and it's been about 4 months. Been busy getting married in Costa Rica. Vale and I got married and just moved into a house. And Vale's been in the U.S., was in the U.S. for a few months, and so I also spoke at Sunstone Symposium as well in August. So been a little busy over the summer, but I wanted to get back on here to start producing some more content, but also announce that on Facebook, Vale and I created a Facebook group for the podcast, just a place where people can connect with other people interested in these topics, kind of the overlap of science and spirituality, and as well as I wanted to start a weekly group. Figured we'd give it a shot for 8 weeks. Just a place that, an online group that we can meet together, connect with other like-minded individuals. I don't think necessarily religious related, although that's open. So I don't know that it'd be, themed much about Mormonism. Although I imagine, a decent amount of people, percentage of people that show up may have found the podcast through that. But essentially just a place that we can meet weekly, try to connect, build some community, and maybe an hour and a half have some kind of a Dharma talk and some practice, meditation, inner child meditation. Vale, I think, will be leading a fair amount of those, as well as some of the kind of the Dharma talks, and then some just discussion and getting to meet, connect, process with other people. I feel like there's a fair amount of podcasts and places online to meet and discuss, but a lot of them are more geared around kind of dichotomous, true, false, Mormonism, apologetics, anti-Mormonism, or why one theory of everything is more true than another one, or another one's false, rather than seeing the interconnectedness and overlap, and how these are all just different perspectives and what are the most useful perspectives. And so yeah, we're going to call that the Mystics Collective, and just see where it goes. Maybe just us, maybe a group of people that want to come together and just chat and connect. So the Facebook group is Mystics and Muons, and then there's an event in there, just a recurring event called the Mystics Collective, and the first meeting is going to be Saturday, September 21st at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Like I said, probably an hour and a half. Vale, if you're listening and you haven't listened to any of the episodes with her, Valentina is my wife. She's a life coach, spiritual coach, Reiki master, and kind of balances the more intuitive, meditative, brings the balance in the intuitive, meditative, astrological, that side of things, where I maybe go a little more cerebral and scientific, although she enjoys those topics as well. So anyway, I think we wanted to start the first one discussing relationships, and read, I may read I Met God at a Festival, which was the last episode that I posted, and just talk a bit about that, especially coming out of Mormonism. I think that's something that I had to update a lot of, just like what healthy relationships were. And yeah, so hopefully we'll see you there, September 21st, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And the other nice thing that happened recently, I had somebody a listener of the podcast reach out to me on Facebook and connect with me, and we talked a bit. Over this last week, they shared a YouTube video related to entropy. After school was the channel, and it was just nice to hear. I don't actually hear that often from people that listen to the podcast. Here and there I do, and so sometimes it feels a bit like I'm speaking into a black hole, speaking into my MacBook Pro on a Tuesday night in Portland. And I know that doesn't mean that it's not impactful and meaningful to people. A lot of people, I've been impacted by a lot of things and usually don't reach out and tell them, because I'm assuming that other people are reaching out, or that the content creator knows. But that was really meaningful to me. And so I presented at Sunstone, a Symposium in August, and it was kind of an interesting, and I'll put that up as an episode soon, my presentation there. I didn't get to get through it all at Sunstone, but it was kind of an interesting experience for me because I'd signed up for it and I was a lot more energized about the Mormon, post-Mormon space. And then by the time it rolled around, I was like, oh man, I need to do this presentation. And it was a little hard getting that like passion, that fire back. But I put something together and I felt like it came together really well. But it was interesting going to Sunstone, and not too many people attended, but I got to meet a couple listeners of the podcast, which was cool there. But it's sort of interesting for me to kind of reflect on what space I'm in and how much of this was for like creating something to put out there and help other people, and how much of it was just my own processing. And that's what it felt much more at Sunstone of like, yeah, I was so excited about like these pieces that came together, and they just made so much sense to me, and was really excited to integrate all these aspects that other people talked about, like folk magic and esotericism and psychedelic hypothesis, new age stuff. And it was kind of surprising at times that other people weren't as excited about it. And then getting to Sunstone and seeing like everybody's got their own like shtick that they're going on, that they're passionate about. And everybody's got their own process. And I think Sunstone was kind of a space that a lot of people go through, and some people hang out there a lot. And then other people kind of move on. And it felt a little bit to me like there wasn't much more that I could put out new or interesting or different, and that maybe I had processed a lot of, or the majority of what I needed to, at least up until that point. And it's a little bittersweet of feeling like a lot of this was for me and maybe time to move on. But yeah, it was nice to hear from the listener this last week and just like remember, oh yeah, faith transitions, leaving Mormonism. I mean, it's an excruciating, painful, your soul is broken open, and I mean, you feel like you're going to lose everything, your family, your kids, eternity, your partner, and it's so painful. And I think you forget that. I forget that, just how raw that is when you've gone through it. And so, yeah, it was nice to hear that this content is at least helpful for certain people that I think of things this way. I mean, there's plenty of people that leave or that stay and with nuanced positions, and this is not the framework or the models that they think of at all. And that's been another revelation to me of like, yeah, this is the way my brain works, but other people just aren't as interested in some of these things. And so, yeah, if I'm always love to hear from people that are listening and that this has been meaningful to, and it helps me kind of get more excited and energized about this and maybe in the mood to create some more stuff. But one of the things recently I had been thinking about is entropy and getting back on writing this book, expanding the essay that the Essentia Foundation published on entropy as essentially an artifact of consciousness and not an inherent property of like physical systems. And so I've got back on that horse and I've been doing some planning and be doing some writing soon. But I've got a few chapters done and I haven't shared them with anybody. And I read over them the other day and I was like, this is actually really good, and it was inspiring me. And so I figured I'd put out one of these chapters that really I enjoyed writing, and just curious to see what other people, if it resonates with other people the way I hope, or that it did with myself as I was putting it into words. And so this is, we're going to explore an adaptation of Plato's Cave. I read Plato's Republic at BYU actually, in a required class, and really loved it and kind of opened my mind for a while. But then I didn't know where to go after that, and kind of fell off the philosophical horse. So let's explore an adaptation of Plato's Cave. In this cave, we will follow the journey of one prisoner chained at the end of a line of prisoners. The only thing any of these prisoners have ever experienced is the visual perception of shadows flickering across the cave wall. The shackles are so tight it is impossible to look anywhere else or to even feel the cave wall in front of them. All any of them can do is to observe these shadows cast by objects being carried back and forth in front of a fire located behind the line of prisoners. Each prisoner has a unique perspective of the shadows on the wall, and each ends up working out an intricate but often convoluted theoretical model whereby he can make meaning of the shadows and predict the patterns seen. Depending on where in the lineup a prisoner is positioned, his model is formulated to precisely predict the bulges and distortions the shadows undergo when they reach certain areas of his visual field. These correspond to the topographical features of the wall, although the prisoners don't know this. They haven't had the benefit of examining the wall up close, nor do they even have a concept of what walls are. Additionally, each prisoner's model predicts whether the shadows stretch or contract as they trail off to the left or right edges of the wall. The precise locations of where these distortions occur and the nature of how shadows change as they move to the edges is entirely dependent on where the prisoner is situated in the line in relation to the fire and the wall. After a while, when each of the prisoners have largely completed formulating their own model to make sense of the shadows, they start to hear other prisoners talking about their models. Many prisoners, upon hearing others talk about their own models and finding that the models they are hearing work less well than their own, and sometimes even predict contradictory behavior, conclude that other prisoners are wrong. Most have become entirely committed to their own models. They've given each of these shadows particular names, described their exact dimensions, and have produced some convincing stories about why the shadows act in certain ways at certain points and how they causally affect other shadows through their collisions and interactions. Sure, there is some hand-waving involved to explain why some shadows seem to pass through others at certain times while bouncing off at other times, but most are convinced that this is nothing that they can't fully solve with a few more days or years of working on their models. To even begin to open up to another prisoner's model would be a demoralizing step backwards. It would result in a more chaotic, meaningless, disorienting environment. To do so seems like it would require prisoners to abandon all of their hard work as incorrect, or worse, a deception, and for what benefit? Yet the prisoner we are observing, the one at the end, undergoes a curious turn of events. With his position at the end of the line, he's become one of the most vocal prisoners. With only one ear besieged with the arguments of the other prisoners about their models, he's had a bit more peace of mind to devote to developing the most reliable models of all the prisoners. Being at the end of the line, he is also able to observe some of the most drastic modulations of the shadows due to the angle at which he sees the wall, as the slightest of ridges in the wall cause very perceptible changes in the shadows, and the elongation of shadows become very prominent as they reach his portion of the wall. Our prisoner also has great visual acuity and exceptional logical skills, and therefore has created one of the most reliable models of the shadows on the wall. He has no clue why the others can't see it all as plainly as he can, but at least for him, he's quite confident in his ability to identify and predict a good portion of the patterns he sees in the shadows on the wall. It's at this moment, when the confidence in his model and dismissiveness of the other prisoner's sensibilities are at its greatest, that he is anesthetized by an unknown individual and everything goes dark. While unconscious, he's moved to the opposite side of the line. After regaining his senses, he finds himself in the most bizarre of circumstances. He clearly remembers his old model of the shadows because he worked on it for so long and it was so reliable. Yet now our prisoner finds himself experiencing a reality almost unrecognizable to the one he knew just moments before. The shadows appear grotesquely distorted, almost impossible to match to the shadows he's watched for his entire existence. Additionally, the shadows now behave in ways that either are not accounted for by the previous model or even opposite of his predictions. Now when shadows move right, they get smaller instead of larger. When the shadows approach the portion of his visual field where they would previously have narrowed owing to a dip in the wall, they are now fattened by a bulge instead. At first our prisoner despairs. Conversing with nearby prisoners is of no use. While previously the voices near him agreed largely with core principles of his model, these new voices are quite united with each other and conclude he is mad. On the brink of losing his sanity, he finally surrenders. He concludes his previous model and experiences were a hallucination, and resigns himself to creating a new model from the beginning based on what he sees now. Years go by, and he has almost forgotten his previous hallucinated existence and its model of the shadows. He becomes content again that he is able to predict his reality, and finally is about to get some peace when he suddenly gets anesthetized again. This time he's transported directly to the middle of the line of prisoners. When he comes to his senses, he is instantly gripped with panic. The trauma of his previous abduction returns. Now the shadows he sees are not only acting in ways he has never seen, but they are out of accordance with either of his models. It is here where the shouts are most deafening, with prisoners on both sides arguing about the shadows. Despairing, he quickly surrenders without much of a fight, concluding that he can trust nothing. His past was not a hallucination, but instead he must truly be crazy. Resigned to this conclusion, he has nothing to do but absently watch the shadows on the wall. Yet, despite having never seen them from this perspective before, he finds that he almost instantaneously is able to create a new model, which interestingly draws upon aspects of both previous models. His experience at both ends of the line have given him radically different perspectives of the same wall, a gift that none of the prisoners around him have. He begins to predict things in ways that seem miraculous and prophetic to the others. Yet, despite his unique gifts, he is faced with the cumbersome task of switching between three different models, which are not entirely reconcilable with each other. It doesn't take long before he starts to create a model that doesn't involve shadows. He uses made-up words for some sort of object and light source. He conceptualizes three-dimensional space, despite only ever having seen a largely two-dimensional wall. He understands that the shadows aren't the ultimate truth, but merely correspond to a deeper reality he can't quite grasp. The more he works on his higher dimensional model, the more he retreats. At times, he ventures to talk about these concepts with his fellow prisoners, but they quickly shift from revering him as a prophet to concluding he is a madman. He desperately tries to explain to them about these objects and this fire, They ridicule him for thinking he could come to any conclusions about anything in any other terms than that of shadows. He tries to prove his models to the others through examples and reasonings, but they demand he prove it by explaining things in terms of shadows. Despite disagreeing on their models, they are all united in this chorus: shadows are all there are. Again, on the brink of madness, he feels a burst of energy and breaks his chains. Finally free, he turns around and sees the fire and the objects being moved back and forth. Surprisingly, he finds many other prisoners exploring this newly discovered space. At first, this freedom is disorienting. The other prisoners here seem to be calling the fire and the objects different things. There seems to be general agreement about what was going on with the shadows amongst this group, but there's some arguing over what these new discoveries are called. Some aspects of the three-dimensional model our prisoner had conceptualized were wrong. He had visualized the fire in a different location and thought the objects were suspended in the air rather than being carried by people, but he quickly updates his model to integrate his new knowledge. After spending quite a bit of time learning everything he can about the fire and the objects, he approaches the prisoners tightly chained, looking at the wall. He thinks surely now that he has such a reliable model that they will listen to him. Surely the fact that he has conversed with other prisoners in this new space will give him credibility. Yet the chained prisoners are even more resistant than ever. He is now claiming to have seen things that they have never seen, to have spoken to entities that they cannot speak to. His tale sounds even more unhinged. They demand he prove the freed prisoners exist, but only allow him to do so using the shadows on the wall. He offers to free them from the chains, but they demand proof using the shadows. If what he has to say is true, why can't he prove it from the shadows? They all agree that there are shadows. In fact, that is the only thing that they can all agree on. So they will not accept any explanation using any other concept than what they have seen. Shadows are all there are, they yell at him as he returns to the space of the freed prisoners. Dismayed by his failure, another freed prisoner tells him not to worry. They will eventually all have their turn as the prisoner at the end of the line when they are ready. They will all see the fire in due time. The prisoner then asks our prisoner if he is ready to climb out of the cave and see the sun. Our prisoner then moves on to the next level of understanding, a level which is related to the realm of fire and objects in the same way that the level of understanding fire and objects is to the level of understanding shadows. This new level also comes with disorienting pain at the brightness and chaos of being confronted with sensory input for which he has no constructs with which to organize it. He may at times long for the comforting dimness and familiarity of the cave. At other times he may return in a zealous mission to share this further knowledge with the freed prisoners milling around the fire. Painfully, these people who he had considered his peers in truth will likely also view him as crazy, perhaps threatening him. In many ways, these freed prisoners are even more recalcitrant. In their minds, they have found the truth. They have awoken from the slumber of the shadows. There is nothing more to seek. Our prisoner may seem as delusional as the prisoners chained at the wall. Our prisoner recontextualizes what he thought was the ultimate truth, a model he created using the constructs of fire and objects, into just another allegorical level. By now, he's starting to learn the pattern, and he recognizes that the sun, in all its glory, is but a placeholder, a symbol. This new realm he is experiencing outside of the cave is also but a cave. There will be a time when he climbs out of this one as well. While he cannot conceptualize stars, solar systems, and galaxies, he is learning to understand in patterns and relationships. This type of knowledge holds constructs for what they are, pointers, and focuses understanding on the relationships between these pointers. This understanding of reality is akin to finding the formula for the fractal and viewing it as a vector image rather than studying and copying the fractal pixel by pixel. These patterns are the first principles and serve as an undercurrent of truth in all levels of experience, whether one is looking at shadows, at fires and objects, or at the sun and the world outside the cave. Holding on to this understanding provides an anchor amidst revolutionary paradigm shifts. When one focuses teleologically on the goal of climbing the ladder, rather than just focusing on grasping the next rung, she is more able to let go of previous rungs and continue progressing. We'll return to this adaptation of Plato's Cave later to explore its further implications on knowledge and the pursuit of truth, But for now, I hope that it at least builds a tentative framework for how a greater understanding of a field of knowledge may come from sources that seem far outside of the expertise of that field, require a thorough examination of the prior assumptions of that field, challenge fundamental assumptions of that field, require a redefinition of terms to accommodate other fields of knowledge, and require new constructs that cannot be conceptualized from within the narrow scope of that field. Now, neither Plato's cave nor my adaptation of it holds any intrinsic merit. There are countless allegories one can construct, many of which will lead to irrational thinking and dead ends. But again, this book requires no acceptance of any theory, idea, or proposal without it withstanding the scrutiny of logic and experience. This adaptation is in no way shared as a proof or argument for anything to follow, but is merely a proposed conceptual framework to assist with the personal organization and evaluation of the simple concepts which will come later. At that point, it will be up to the reader to determine whether there is merit in the arguments of this book. This approach frees the reader from any obligation to take any theories or proposals on faith, while also obligating those arguing against these ideas to logically and specifically address the steps they disagree with. In other words, I'll be showing my logical work throughout the book and encourage those approaching from different perspectives to show theirs. All right, thanks for listening. That's just one of the early chapters of the book, basically laying the groundwork for, I guess you'd call it epistemology, or how we know things and how we create models of understanding, and basically how we really have to deconstruct everything and focus on relationships between pointers, constructs, information, rather than on the things themselves. So anyway, it's good to be back, and thank you for listening. And again, I'd love to see anybody at the Mystics Collective, September 21st at 9 a.m., which I guess may be the equinox. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.